Back in the summer, this was the most anticipated home game of the Notre Dame football season, and Notre Dame Stadium pulled out all the stops. It provided a fun, raucous atmosphere for the crowd under the lights. The players loved it. I think the fans were rewarded. 52-3 over Florida State, John Brice. I'm Tim O'Malley. This is Irish Illustrated Overtime. We expected a beating. That was an evisceration, and it really came in three quarters because Florida State, quality start, JB, 16-play drive. It only yielded a field goal, but it seemed to settle down the game a little bit before the Irish could take off.
Yeah, that 16-play drive early just sort of kept Notre Dame from offensively developing a rhythm that would allow the Irish to completely run away from their guests in the first half. But Notre Dame proved the superior team in all phases. And as our intrepid intern Noah Farizzi pointed out, somewhere along the lines of the second worst loss ever in Florida State program history. And that's 2 in the last 11 months, because the other one, of course, was you want to talk about eviscerations. They were buried under the soil of the bowl game by Georgia. I think that was the Orange Bowl last year, around 63-3. So that's a bad Florida State team. This is what I contend an ever improving Notre Dame team.
I don't think there's a turning point in this game, but there was one, I think, coaching mistake by Mike Norvell near the end of the first half, 41 seconds left. Notre Dame has a 3rd and 17. Riley Leonard completes a 15-yard pass for Bo Collins at the FSU 44-yard line. They are choosing to kick a very long field goal with Zach Yoakum, and Norvell calls timeout to preserve 41 seconds, his last timeout, so he would really have trouble mounting much of a drive there, although they do have a fantastic kicker. Notre Dame, of course, then decides to go for it on 4th and 2. Riley Leonard keeps it for 10 yards, and about 5 snaps later throws probably his best pass of the day, JB, the just leading Mitchell Evans right down the left rail for a touchdown. That made it 21-3. I think it eased any angst in the crowd, and you just knew that Florida State could not score that many points on Al Golden's defense at that point.
No, I mean, at 14-3, you felt like the game was over. At 21-3, you thought this would turn into the blowout we all expected across the second half. I wonder about that timeout, T.O., and I thought it at the time, a bizarre timeout. But he may have been thinking or reminding his defense, hey, watch out for a fake here. I'm not sure that Notre Dame was truly going to line up and have Yoakum attempt a 61-yard field goal on a night where the winds were kind of swirling a little bit, and it wasn't just automatic, pristine weather for a long field goal attempt. So I think that was probably overcoaching in the moment a little bit. Let them try to run the fake if that's what it was going to be, or just trust your defense. 61-yard field goals are not gimmies at the NFL level. They're at best a coin toss at the collegiate level.
We should quickly mention, because it did not become a story, Mitch Jeter came in to kick. He missed from 42 yards. He either had a reaction that I wouldn't expect a veteran to have, or he tweaked his groin a little bit more, but he then came back in and kicked a field goal later and extra points. He will not kick off, I don't think, the rest of the year. Eric Goins is doing a good job there, but Jeter's back. And as you've mentioned many times when players are coming back, it's important to get them back before the game you need them back. And that's where Jeter was today in Florida State. So, yeah, I want to flip it to the defense, because when the team scores 45 offensive points, the offense did something right, but the defense was an absolute force over the final 3 quarters. Marcus Freeman illustrated it. It was shutdown time after that drive. There were 6 3-and-outs. There was 2 more punt possessions. There was a turnover on downs on Florida State's other best drive, where it looked like they were going to threaten in the 3rd quarter. Jalen Sneed with a sack forced fumble on 4th down. Interception by Jordan Clark, and of course, an interception touchdown by Luke Talich to seal the proceedings. That is one way to finish off a defensive football game over 45 minutes.
Yeah, and one thing to note, that 16-play drive that resulted only in a field goal, the entirety of the rest of the game, Florida State only had 53 snaps, the rest of the game, and that was right around 50 minutes or somewhere along those lines. So just more domination. Shout out to Tom Noy. We're standing on the field at the end of the game watching Florida State try to score a touchdown that wouldn't have changed anybody's perception in this game, but they were very clearly just continuing to run rollouts on every play. And it was a sideline out left or sideline out right. And I said, well, if they're going to score a touchdown, it might be where they bluff the sideline out and come back across the middle. And Noy said, or they throw the sideline out and it becomes a pick 6. And literally the next snap, Luke Talich took it to the house, and he said, you better give me credit on that. So there's his credit. he's a glory hound like that. But shout out Luke Talich, the Wyoming player who continues to be a very nice and quality addition to this Notre Dame roster when he came in as a walk-on and as we know since earned a scholarship.
We'll give Tom Noy one more. He's never been a jump shot he doesn't like either in pickup, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. Tom, the intern, throws the stat up, and I'm going to juxtapose it with another. Florida State won the time of possession battle by 7 minutes. Florida State also, for the first time I think I've ever tracked this, had about a 65% rush efficiency. Notre Dame has just over 50%. Whatever the pass efficiency stats were, I didn't keep them, but they would be very low because it was a really rough day for Florida State's quarterbacks. Pressured throughout. If you're going by unofficial pressures and sacks, I had about 16 before I went downstairs for the final 5 or 6 minutes. It was Notre Dame's best pass rushing game of the season. Florida State, however, as you pointed out in our instant analysis, or maybe it was just prior, they do have that effect on defensive lines.
This might be among my favorite stats, and we know that I've fixated on the one that Florida State still has yet to score 20 points this season in the United States. That streak lives on. That stat lives on. The other thing I love is that Notre Dame had 8 sacks and 4 official quarterback hurries tonight, which is a number of 12. They had more sacks and quarterback hurries than Florida State completed passes in the entirety of the game. Florida State had 10 completed passes compared to allowing 12 combined sacks and quarterback hurries. That's the utter painting of futility. That's exactly what this was, and this was dominance from the Notre Dame defense. Obviously, some concern with the ankle injury to Howard Cross. We saw him leave the field. He had a very heavy wrap on his left ankle. You could also see the formings. Yeah, you can see on that left ankle the formings of that ankle brace up around it to mid-shin. It's one of those that splits in the half and really immobilizes your ankle on each side. And so that's what he was wearing to limp off the field there. Howard Cross, he's played so much football. You won't need him next week on senior day. You want to see him be able, though, to be honored on senior day as much as he's given to Notre Dame. The fact that he came back for this extra year. But he's a guy that if you don't need to play him until Southern Cal or till the playoffs, you feel good about it. I think they could use him at Southern Cal.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think they need him until then.
It's his 3rd senior day, so maybe he can celebrate senior day on December 20th or December 21st when he comes back for an extra senior day because he's been out there for a few of those. I want to add one more fun stat. At one point, it was, I believe, going into the 4th quarter, Florida State's quarterback Brock Glenn, Pete Sampson pointed out to me, had a 1.8 passer rating, which if it was out of 10 instead of 150, that'd be pretty bad. So that was a rough day. It actually went up on that drive where the interception touchdown occurred for Florida State. So rough day for Florida State's offense. Notre Dame's offense, as you mentioned, the result of that 16-play drive by Florida State did probably throw off the rhythm of the Irish offense because that was a 5-play, 75-yard touchdown drive by Notre Dame to start it. Boy, Riley Leonard, we'll talk about this in a minute. He looks athletic when he takes off and runs. He covers some ground. Really nice dead leg move to break free there for the start of the run. Then Notre Dame went 3 plays, 2 yards, 3 plays, negative 3 yards. I think that's what you're discussing when you're saying it kind of slowed the Notre Dame's roll by possessing the ball that long.
It did, and great point on Leonard's athleticism and speed, frankly, because it's one thing to see Riley Leonard running away from Georgia Tech defenders or from Navy defenders. It's an entirely different equation when he's running away from Florida State. This Florida State team sucks, but this is still a Florida State team with a lot of overall team speed and some really gifted athletes at some of the skill positions on defense that should have been able to track Riley Leonard down and simply were not.
I'm glad you said that because Jadarian Price also ran away from Florida State's defense. The first thing I said to Tim Priester was, when's the last time you remember a Florida State guy getting outrun, a defensive back getting outrun for the final 45 yards? This is what happened there. Riley Leonard did the same thing. Big for Price to have another good day. I think maybe I make too much of the fact that every other run of his is stuffed. It would be nice to see him get a couple 5-yard gains, but he stayed true to form. 17 yards, stuff. 65-yard touchdown, stuff. 12-yard run, stuff. If you're going to throw in 65 every time, you can get stuffed as much as you want. You just have to make sure there's that big play involved as well. He hit the hole really well. I think Eli Raridan sprung him on that run.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note if you dial into the analytics, it's almost like MLB analytics. You got a bunch of guys out there that strike out 3 times a game, but they homer every other game. And with Jadarian Price, he's quickly developing a track record of being a home run guy, and in some of the biggest moments or in primetime settings. He had the long run in primetime to open the season against Texas A&M. He did it, as he said, Marcus Freeman reminded him a year ago against USC, and he does it tonight on primetime NBC and Notre Dame's only home night game of the year. One more quick note on the offense. They did lack a rhythm, especially in the first half. Scoring before the half is really key. Actually, that middle eight, we know, is such a focus for so many programs, and Notre Dame has begun to emphasize it more and more. I thought that was significant, but no turnovers. And so thankfully, Andrew Mintock helped me look it up. This is consecutive games without turnovers for the Notre Dame offense. And 4 of the 9 games on the year now, Notre Dame has not committed a turnover in there. I'm sure somebody will accuse me of jinxing, much like Tim Priester did when he basically willed Riley Leonard to throw an interception earlier this year. But that's now 11 consecutive quarters without a turnover for the Notre Dame offense. That is significant. You want to see trending in that direction going into the season stretch run.
Riley Leonard said he felt he left some plays out there in the passing game. We mentioned on instant analysis there were 2 drops. Good coverage at times. You mentioned he was almost like he could have been an 18 for 27 passer instead of 14 for 27, which does change the outside narrative. But the first 6 drives for Notre Dame, 2 touchdowns, one great crisp drive, and the other was basically Jadarian Price's run. 2 3-and-outs, another punt, and a missed field goal on what I would consider an inefficient drive. But after that, 4 touchdowns and a field goal, and as we noted, half to half, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. It's better to finish that way if you're Riley Leonard coming off the bye week. I think going into next week, a little bit of rhythm. 14 for 27 will put you in jeopardy a little bit if Army and USC can score. 18 for 27 would not. That's why I think that's a really good point by if you hit a couple of those balls, and I think back in rhythm, Riley Leonard will. Yeah.
Well, and again, at least 2 drops. The Mitchell Evans catch would have been a fabulous catch, but it was initially deemed a catch, and then there was one more where if he's literally a half second earlier and hitting Jaden Harrison coming out of his break, then it's not only a completion, but you're getting Jaden Harrison in a one-on-one situation on the perimeter with a chance to make something shake. So that's not covering up for Riley. He said it. He said, quote, "I made just some ignorant decisions out there and then left a lot of stuff and got greedy." We continue to hear some of those key phrases, remembering the pain of Northern Illinois, being the greedy players and coaches. Those are Marcus Freemanisms that we're continuing to hear trickle down over the course of this season.
You mentioned Jaden Harrison. I thought in limited chances he had a good day. 26-yard catch and a 21-yard catch. Jordan Faison had a drop, but he had a 22-yard 4th down catch, which was big in the second half. I brought this up to Riley Leonard. We talked about it. Jaden Greathouse with his best game because he had 3 catches that all moved the chains. He drew a pass interference. He gained 20 and 26 yards on 3rd down catches. That's what I expect from Jaden Greathouse, and that's what I think they can get, and that's a big step for the offense because we're waiting on Faison and Harris and Jaden Harrison, Bo Collins. The real Mitchell Evans is coming. He was here part of the time today. I really think the real Jaden Greathouse was here today.
Yeah, and maybe Jaden Greathouse isn't quite the most talented member of the Notre Dame wide receiver room. He's at or near the top, but I think Jaden Greathouse is the best pure football player of Notre Dame's wide receiver room, and you want to see him hitting his form this late in the season, particularly when he shined a good bit as a freshman, but then sort of hit a wall, and it's been a little bit slower matriculation for him over the course of this season. But I think his production there is significant. And again, he's a very decisive player now when he gets the football. He's really gifted in those tunnel screens. I think he sees the field well. Showed tonight he kind of sees the field at times like a running back rather than a wide out. And I just think he's critical for what Notre Dame's offense needs to do down the stretch.
Tim Priester just joining us here on Irish Illustrated Overtime. Tim, we haven't gotten into much of the individual defense yet other than Riley Mills. Donovan Heinisch had one of his better games as well. And he started to shine when Howard Cross went down.
He did in the pass rush. I think it's a little disappointing, though, against the run. I thought they got gashed up the middle a couple times without Cross in there. But, yeah, there's no doubt. And Jaden Osbury, how about the play that Jaden Osbury made where he not only what did he do? He
drew multiple penalties on a TFL.
he defended the play, and he drew a clip in the back. So yeah, Riley Mills, when all is said and done with his career, he's really stepped up. Maybe not consistent early in the season, but he just keeps getting better and better. And this was just such a vulnerable offensive line for Florida State. I think I said in instant analysis that, like, you can't. It's like, how can Florida State be that bad? You just saw why. They're a pretty awful football team. But yeah, Notre Dame's defensive players did what they needed to do. And as I look at the list of things you guys have talked about, you've hit most of it, haven't you?
Yes, but we're about to hit the national news too. I did want to give, because we've talked about this guy a lot. Junior Tuihalamaka, tackle for loss, quarterback sack, and a pressure again. He has come to play since being forced into the lineup. He is not Boubacar Traore, but he has much better statistics than I ever thought he would have had. As the third string Viper that could have been a 4-game redshirt this season had Botello and Traore never been hurt, as a true junior. Now it's quite a turnaround for him. He's really made the most of it.
I think he's a microcosm for the maturity that we've talked about seeing develop from this team. And I think it's important to note that we hit on maturity in our pregame instant analysis, setting the stage for tonight. And then one of the first things Marcus Freeman did postgame was talk about the maturity of this Notre Dame team and being very pleased with just its mental and physical approach and the way that it went out and took care of business. So a little slow taking care of business in that first quarter, very systematic and methodical thereafter.
Well, I got to give you guys credit. You called it with Tuihalamaka. I was very skeptical after he flashed a little bit earlier in the season, but he has been consistently good. And I just, as body language to me as an observer of the game and a former coach is huge. And his body language says, man, I believe in what I'm capable of doing out here. And so it was a good matchup for him. On another show this week, I was asked who the picks to click were, and I was looking at the Vipers. Burnham didn't. I'm not sure how much he did, but Tuihalamaka definitely flashed. And then that interior defensive line just, it tenderizes the middle of an opposing offensive line, which then opens up things for other people coming off the edge.
And Jalen Sneed, it's good. It's Jalen Sneed with the 4th down sack, technically a forced fumble. Before that, I wrote down Sneed pressure question mark on 3rd down, so he must have been close to a pressure. Maybe it was a pro football focused pressure, not an official college football pressure. I want to get a couple of questions before we move on to the big picture, because a lot happened today, and there's still some going on. Has the second half begun yet for Utah and BYU? I know Utah led going in there. Sorry if already Deadpool says, sorry if you already talked about this, but where was Chris Mitchell in all of this? They just rotate 6 receivers, and sometimes somebody doesn't get the ball. I was thinking he might get the ball as well, because as the Florida State fan growing up, you thought they might have one thing dialed up from him in a blowout game. But look, it was Jaden Greathouse's day. Jaden Harrison, 2 big plays, and they want Faison involved. And Mitchell Evans. He was the 5th option today. He didn't get the ball thrown to him.
You would have liked to have had Chris Mitchell involved. He was a starter for the Irish. I don't know that he got a target over the course of the day. What I will say is that leading into this game, Mitchell very obviously had played his best football for Notre Dame over the balance of October. And so I think there is, you make a great point, T.O., that there's a concerted effort to continue getting Jaden Greathouse more integrated and continue getting Jordan Faison recovered and back into the flow of the offense with his 2 separate ankle injuries this year.
Yeah, and we saw Jaden Harrison flash today too. So we knew going into the season that there were a lot of decent candidates to catch passes. It is a bit of a shame that Chris Mitchell hasn't been more involved. He did have a couple touchdowns, I think, in back-to-back weeks a few weeks ago. They don't have a superstar receiver, so you spread the wealth. The last game it was Faison. He had a bad drop. That was a little bit of a difficult catch, but he needs to make that catch. There's a lot, there are a lot of targets for the football to go around. Riley Leonard and Steve Angeli combined for almost 15 yards per reception. I made a comment in instant analysis about Marcus Freeman just wanting to run out the clock, that perhaps he got some criticism from the TV people, but they did throw the touchdown pass from Angeli to Colsey. But look, hey, it's playoff time. I'm not a.
I don't understand how there could be any criticism in this game. You go until there's 4 minutes left at least, and then run out the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Marcus Freeman is the phrase style points is overused. I don't think that he's a big believer in that. I think most of the time he just wants to possess the football and not let the opponent score. But Steve Angeli, look, they're making a run for the playoffs. If Riley Leonard runs a bunch, if he gets banged up, Angeli's got to be ready to throw the football. So look, Marcus Freeman isn't trying to embarrass anybody. Everybody knows that's not his MO, but they are fighting to move up in the standings. And Tim, you mentioned it in this analysis. I don't know how. Maybe they'll move up a spot. Maybe they won't, because Alabama probably moves ahead of them. Did you want to get into that conversation a little bit?
Maybe you had a follow up for the ending.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that on Marcus Freeman, I haven't heard the television commentary yet, but it's laughable to think that there's anything going on other than Marcus Freeman coaching a football game and giving his players who work so damn hard the chance to go out and execute in the only primetime game of the year inside Notre Dame Stadium against a program in Florida State that is god-awful this year but still carries a lot of cachet. And so you're letting some guys create some memories, and I don't have a problem with that. Florida State was throwing the football until inside of 90 seconds. Notre Dame has every right in the world to go out and execute, and those players should get the opportunity to execute. We saw a Jake Tefelsky make a couple of plays tonight. We know he's the guy that they got from Central Michigan that played a lot of football. He caught a pass. He had a run. We saw Trey Reeder make a tackle late in the game.
Justin Fisher.
Fisher looked really, really fun and entertaining to watch out there tonight. Luke Talich, obviously, with the pick six. Boys, that's football. I got no issue with it. I can't understand the announcers unless they're just bored overemphasizing it. But find some better talking points. Find something interesting about Tefelsky and note that he played at Central Michigan instead of just saying, well, they're trying to score style points for the CFP. I don't buy into that. I know we're transitioning into the CFP talk, and an incredibly compelling day on many fronts. And Utah currently leads BYU by 8 points in the second half, deep into the third quarter in Salt Lake City at Utah's Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's significant, not because it would knock BYU out of the playoffs, but I think it would further cement the Big 12 as a one-bid team if BYU suffers a loss between now and the Big 12 championship game, much as why I think the most significant thing about Miami losing today is that it's another hammer blow to the ACC, in my opinion, being anything more than a one-bid league.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Tim, how many times, JB, you know this too, how many times did Brian Kelly and even Marcus Freeman, you're not giving the backups enough of an opportunity? Marcus Freeman's done a great job to let those guys play. And it's important that they get some live reps. Yeah, BYU is pinned back at their own 5-2, JB. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rest of that game. But
there's two one-bid leagues in the Big 12 and the ACC is huge for Notre Dame because, as JB has been pointing out, the rest of the SEC is coming. There's going to be a lot of SEC in that playoff. It's Ole Miss has been. Tell everybody what you said when you saw Ole Miss putting it on Georgia today.
I said, frankly, that's bad news for Notre Dame because you're now sitting here with a bunch of potential 2-loss teams in the SEC. And if you've got Georgia with 2 losses now, Ole Miss with 2 losses now, Alabama with 2 losses now, Tennessee and Texas A&M at the top of the standings, I guess, with 1 league loss.
Texas, that's 6. Texas with 1. We always forget Texas now.
Yeah, so that's 7 teams, I think, right there with 1 or 2 losses. Now, Tennessee and Georgia play each other next week. If Georgia was to lose that game, you get rid of Georgia from playoff discussion at that point in time. But again, I thought that for Notre Dame's sake, I thought Georgia winning today would have been better. Now you have to wait a few more weeks to see and hope that some additional dominoes fall if you're tracking the Irish and trying to track best case scenarios for their playoff hopes.
Yeah, I meant to say this. This is off topic, but back to previous topics, but I just wanted to say this. I told Tim before we left the press conference, Virginia gave up 10 sacks last week to North Carolina. So here it comes. Now, there was a lot of concern that you guys are saying Florida State isn't good. They can't do. Florida State was not going to be able to compete in this game. I mean, that's who they've been all year. Virginia, I look at a little bit differently. I'm not saying Virginia is going to beat Notre Dame, but they can do some things. They've showed some consistency. They generally compete. Now they won tonight. They beat Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, so that was big because they had been handled by Clemson and North Carolina in recent weeks. So, Virginia can do some things. They're bad defensively, and they did give up 10 sacks to UNC last week.
Okay, I wanted to clarify one thing I got wrong on instant analysis post-game in saying that I thought this was not the record this season for the most sacks allowed by Florida State in a single game. It is the most sacks that any team has registered this season against Florida State is 8, which is what the Irish got tonight. It is not the most tackles for loss in a game this season with the 10 TFLs that Notre Dame had. As a matter of fact, guys, this is the 4th time this year that Florida State has yielded double-digit TFLs. They gave up 12 TFLs in their loss to Memphis. They gave up 11 TFLs against Duke. They gave up 10 TFLs in their most recent game against North Carolina and another 10 TFLs tonight.
It's a jailbreak against them, man.
Very quickly, Zapatos 1290 wants to know, did Knapp come back after injury? He did. I wanted to bring this up because Priester looked over to me and said, who comes in, Lambert or Baker? And I was like, well, it better be Baker until they figure out what they have in Knapp's injury, because that's what Baker's for at this point, to be the unselfish player going in there. But no, Knapp came back, and Knapp was involved in I'm trying to think of what touchdown he was back for. It was one of the going, not Jadarian Price's, but it was going to the left. Baker was involved in that, but it was going to the left side. So he re-entered fairly early.
And I marked it. I measured the time in the press box because I had a kind of a direct line of sight across the field to the tent. And so obviously you can't see in the tent. You can see when somebody goes in and comes out. Anthony Knapp was in the tent for basically exactly 5 minutes. He missed pretty similar to that in terms of game time. His first play upon re-entry was Notre Dame's first offensive snap of the second quarter.
And the problem with the cross injury, we've said in instant analysis, at this stage of the year, if it's a high ankle sprain, which it looked like the way it was taped, you'd hope to have him back for USC.
Yeah, we mentioned that they probably could use USC with Howard Cross, but he'll be a lot healthier if you can get through USC without Howard Cross, because that's 22 more days until your next game, and probably a solid 10 days till he has to start practicing again.
Well, yeah, but you do everything you can to get him back for USC. You have to.
Sure, but it's if you can somehow get through that, and we also mentioned that he's been in a couple senior days already. He can have a senior day on December 21st. He's been through more senior days than anybody in Notre Dame history, so we're fine in that.
Oh, no doubt.
So you keep saying the 21st, but I wouldn't rule out the powers that be in control.
They're playing on my birthday, JB. They're playing on my birthday. That's how I'm celebrating my birthday. It's a 75% chance I'm sticking with it. So Oregon, OSU, Texas, Penn State, and Tennessee. Do we accept that as the status quo after today? So Oregon, Ohio State moves up, Texas moves up, Penn State moves up, and UT moves up by not playing, because Miami's falling behind all of that. I
think so, except with Tennessee, we'll see. Josh Heupel commenting after the game that they're operating as if Nico Iamaleava will be back next week to trigger the Tennessee offense. He was injured midway through the Vols' win over Mississippi State tonight, exited the game and did not return. I don't want to speculate on the nature of the injury, but again, Josh Heupel saying post-game that they anticipate him back next week. But that's a huge game at Georgia. If it came out before Tuesday that Iamaleava was done for the year, then I think you could potentially see Tennessee drop a little bit because of that. They were not dominant in beating a Mississippi State team that's widely considered. That's widely considered the worst in the SEC this year as they rebuild under Jeff Levy. So that's one where Tennessee probably stays in front of Notre Dame with a 19-point win at home against a listless Mississippi State team. But given that margin and given the fact that if injury news did break on their quarterback, I could see them dipping because the committee we know will hold that against you.
All right, rapid fire. BYU wins by 1. Do they stay ahead of Notre Dame?
Well, they stay ahead in terms of seeding because I think that would be enough to keep them ahead of Boise State as that least of the conference champions that would get the automatic bye. I don't know that they would be ranked.
That's my question. For now, ranking is the questions, I think.
Yeah, I think if BYU comes back and wins, but it's a 24-21 or 23-21 win for the Cougars, I think they would dip behind Notre Dame.
Yeah. By the way, BYU is on the Utah 12. They're down 8 as they start the fourth quarter. So they're threatening to pull within 2 and then likely go for the 2-point conversion.
IU stays ahead.
Probably. I thought that was a pretty lackluster victory, though. That's not a good Michigan team, and IU had some white knuckle moments very late in the game to hang on and beat that Wolverines team. So,
we got a bunch of firsts this year. We got Indiana going to Michigan and winning and thinking it was lackluster, and Florida State coming in 1-8.
Indiana wasn't home, but it was a lackluster.
Oh, I keep saying that. The second time I said that, I apologize.
Memorial was sold out. It was a great scene. If you saw the game on TV or saw some of the celebrations, but IU wasn't home. Now they get an open date, and then they close with Ohio State and Purdue. Purdue is the worst team in FBS. I think Purdue is the worst team in FBS, not named Kent State. They're not only the worst power conference team, I think they're the worst team in FBS. So that won't be a test for the Hoosiers rivalry game or not.
4 teams left to ask you about. Miami moved behind Notre Dame. All logic.
I think they should. I just think that just being completely objective, that's fair. It wouldn't matter what the name of the team is. Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech.
That's my point.
In Atlanta, Notre Dame won comfortably by 16 or 18 points. And in Atlanta, Miami had to score late to not lose by double digits. And look, Notre Dame will never stop saying that Notre Dame has a disaster loss on its schedule against Northern Illinois in the first week of the season. But as Andrew Mintock had pointed out, Miami had been trending toward disaster for a long time. Yeah. They were lucky. And Virginia Tech, nearly losing to Virginia Tech, which controlled that whole game, looks worse every week because Virginia Tech got smoked again today at home by Clemson.
And they got Georgia Tech they got gashed by the Georgia Tech running game. And Georgia Tech's running backs are like they're down to their third, fourth, fifth string running backs, and they gashed them. Absolutely. Notre Dame should move ahead of Miami.
Here's where it gets interesting. Not necessarily the first one. Alabama moves ahead of Notre Dame.
Probably. I think so. Going on the road and getting that kind of dominant win against a team that was right there around it in the CFP rankings, and also holding that win over Georgia at the time and holding that win over Clemson. You can point, and like it or not, Alabama has 3 incredibly quality victories.
Yeah, thanks, BK, for not making it a very competitive.
That was great.
Notre Dame fans are loving it, huh?
Number 3, Georgia. Stay above Notre Dame with the second loss?
Probably.
Rough loss, though. That was not a quality effort by the
It wasn't very competitive.
Yeah.
10 points. What?
Maybe they fall all the way to 10 and Notre Dame slides up above them. T.O., you have the best question as it pertains to that. What do they do with Ole Miss? What happens?
Yeah, if Georgia falls behind Notre Dame, Ole Miss is either ahead of Notre Dame or Georgia falls 2 behind Notre Dame, because Ole Miss has to be ranked ahead of Georgia when they both have 2 losses.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss
you're right. The committee's got their hands full with that.
BYU just scored and will attempt a 2-point conversion to try and tie things up at 21 there in the shadow of the Wasatch Mountains.
I don't know if you guys understand how to try to keep people watching our show as opposed to going to live college football, but this would be a bad way of doing it because I'm just going to cancel the show to go watch that thing right there. But no, anything left on the 52-3 absolute blowout of Florida State? It's Tim and I looked down there before the game. I was like, looking at their uniforms and their helmet. I'm like, how are they 1-8? That just doesn't make any sense, guys.
It is just a style. There's bad, and then there's self-created bad. Like they add layers of bad to their program. And we were down on field late in the game. You look at Mike Norvell, and I don't have any feelings one way or another about Mike Norvell, but I do know what it's like when you're on the losing end of something that you're pretty embarrassed about. And that's a forsaken look on the face of Mike Norvell.
Anything else, JB?
No, let's wrap it up so that we can watch the end of this game.
Yes. Good crowd tonight. We even got a little bit of tomahawk chop going there by the Notre Dame fans. I do appreciate the In fact, you have to get Florida. Hey, Florida State came here at 137-0 one time. So it's good for Notre Dame fans to remember the pain that Florida State has caused as well. For Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, John Brice of the Football Scoop, I'm Tim O'Malley. Thank you for joining us on Irish Illustrated Overtime.